Well, hello everybody. My name's Chris Randle, and I am your one-off host for this particular episode of the Love the Ride podcast. Because after this, today's guest is going to be the future host. So I will hand it straight over to Tim Farmer from Nduro Events. Tim, who are you, and why do you ride?
Why do I ride? All right, I'm Tim. I'm one of the owners of Nduro Events. My lovely wife is the other owner. Um, and this all came about because we love to ride. Like literally, I was racing 24-hour world champs, and Belinda was just riding and doing a few races. And we heard these events that Nduro own weren't going to be around much longer. And here we are now.
So when are we talking?
Then
Like
you,
how far ago is this period of time that we're talking about?
Yeah, cool. So I didn't actually start mountain biking until 2008. Prior to that, I was road cycling and duathlon, a little bit of triathlon, but I swim like a lead weight. So yeah, that wasn't so good. So yeah, got into mountain biking in 2008. It just so happened to be our first date with Belinda and I. We hired some bikes here at Planet Bike here in Rotorua. We lived in Tauranga at the time, and yeah, that was it. It started from there. Mountain biking has been in the family. Both my brothers raced. My brother used to race with John Hume and Steve Gurney and all that sort of thing back in those days. Used to race in a team for pin cycles. I think back when the Mongoose was actually a bike.
Wow.
Um, yeah, going back a wee while. So my half brother was a semi-professional road cyclist as well. So bike riding's been around for a while. But yeah, I was predominantly a surfer. So those years in between.
So I've known you for about 10 years now, and you always tell me, just like you just randomly throw it in from time to time. Oh, that time I was sponsored by this particular brand or that particular brand. Like you were quite serious for a period of time there, right?
Yeah, I was probably a which is the best way to say it, wannabe athlete. Wasn't by any means a professional or anything, but yeah, I used to when I was doing 24-hour racing, used to get supported by Trek bikes here in New Zealand, Enduro cycling clothing, Mule Bar at the time. Mule Bar I don't think is in New Zealand anymore. Um, Vittoria tyres, which was back then GX tyres, so I've been riding those tyres for a good part of nearly 15, 18 years now. So yeah, but did the 24-hour long endurance stuff. I can remember a time when I lined up in an XCO race, and I think it was at Hanua, um, and Kim Hurst, who was an elite female athlete, is. She, I think, lapped me twice, and they felt sorry to 80% me on the first lap, so they let me do two laps. That's when I quickly realised I wasn't fast, but I like riding stupid long distances. That became my thing. So.
So
Yeah.
2008 through to when did you actually decide I'm going to do the opposite side of this? Because I know you had a history of event related stuff in your past, but what was the point where you were like, oh, I'm going to get into organizing mountain biking events because I like riding in them? That seems like quite a jump for most people.
Totally. 2013, we'd just returned from, I'd raced in the Wembo 24-hour endurance solo world championships in Canberra. Um, First two laps were absolutely amazing. And then it just went south from there. Ended up quite unwell. And I swear to God, anybody that was at that race knew I saw glow in the dark spiders. They may not really exist, but I saw them. Um,
Wonder if
but yeah,
anyone
we
else
came
did.
back. We came back and it was sort of like, why? And this is probably my exact words at the time, but why don't we have the Ironman style of mountain bike events in New Zealand? You looked overseas and you could, Sea Otter was big, but it was still developing and stuff like that. But we didn't have anything here at home. Like the nationals are quite small. Parapody at the time was an amazing event. Taupo, Day Night Thriller, Moonride, they're all amazing events, but they didn't really have that. I'm at this mountain bike event that I'm proud to be at. Um, and so that's sort of got me us thinking. And then at the same time, Marcus Dipros that owned Enduro at the time, we found out that his arrangement with another owner had fallen through, and Marcus and Dean, his business partner, were just too busy to run them, and they had other things going on. And We decided it was a really, really good idea to buy an event portfolio with 19 odd events in it when Belinda was a couple of months pregnant, going, what could go wrong?
And what were you
And
doing for work at the time then?
I was in the police. Belinda was a school teacher. So, um, yeah,
And so you were like, we love riding. We've got this vision to create something really spectacular in New Zealand for riders. We're going to acquire 19 events. I'm not sure, I won't get you to name them all, but the cream of the crop of those events then, and even probably more so now, is the Whaka 100, right?
correct. And I'd just ridden that 4 or 5 days after the 24-hour world champs that I got really sick, and all the advice was don't ride on the Whaka 100. I forgot to leave out I was actually sponsored by Magellan. Hopefully we edit that bit out. Magellan Navman. So Navman owned a bike GPS. So I got looked after by them, and I came back, and I think Magellan were a sponsor of the Whaka 100. Then it was pre-us, and I can remember riding it and literally blowing up so badly that I got off the bike and pushed it into the bushes. It was probably quite a hard push. And then Tony, that was the rep for Navman, came along and was sort of read me the right act somewhere along the lines, and proceeded to tow me probably around 3/4 of the course. And then I was like, woke up and decided I was going to put the hammer down. And I think I finished 26th that year in the Whaka. And then all of a sudden that event became harder the following year as we took over. It just changed dramatically. But yeah, I think the Whaka 100 is definitely was definitely the catalyst to making sure these events continued. I think it was our primary thing. It was like, oh, we can't lose this event off the calendar. There's nothing really else out there. At the time, there was the day night thrill of the moon ride. There's like a 3 hour on Waikiki Island. Just to throw in there a podium there a few times.
Just casually
And
throwing there the podium.
there's a whole bunch of club races and Mototapu, Contact Epic, but we don't really have that many really solid mountain bike events in New Zealand. It was quite rare back then. So
Because
yeah,
in riding terms, there's a whole part of the population that just go out and ride. What's the appeal of the event side of it to you from a rider's perspective?
I think most people do it. If they've got a personal challenge, a personal goal. It's I think that's the way it is for me. I still do crazy stuff every once in a while and go ride without training. Um, but I think it's that goal, and then the second one's probably the experience and the social part of the mountain bike racing. It's still quite good here in New Zealand. There's quite a big social element to it. So yeah,
So you just reflected there quickly, and I want to pick up on it. You just go and do these things without training these days. So talk to me about what riding is for you, kind of post being chasing those podiums, riding really competitively. Over the last few years, what part of your life has been riding?
yeah. I think if I go back to 2013 at the World Champs, it wasn't a great race for me, and I mentally put a block up to training, to riding. So I was probably doing 300 or 400 k's a week, preparing for the 24-hour worlds, and then straight away after probably the end of that year, dropped down to doing about 20 or 30 k's a week. Where now it's probably 20 or 30 k's a month. So I think the cool part about riding is just getting up and just. I actually quite like riding either on dawn or on dusk when it's that golden hour. I just love that time of day, especially in summer when you just go ripping through the trees and the air's still warm, but it's just a wicked light that you don't normally see during the day. So yeah, I think it's just I think it's almost like therapy these days, mountain biking, and a lot of people probably reflect on that. You just turn on some music and pretty much go fuck the world and go off and ride your bike, whether you're with a bunch of other people or you're riding by yourself. I think there's a few moments to be had there. So yeah.
Yeah, for those people that don't know, I work quite closely with the Nduro Events team across their portfolio on sort of the bigger picture stuff. And whenever Tim is feeling a little bit stressed about something, if he then goes to have a ride, you're like a different person the other side of it.
You're saying I don't get stressed very often.
No, you get stressed quite a bit. You work in events. It's an
Just not
occupational
right
hazard.
enough.
But I guess what I'm saying is just reflect back is, I know the difference once, you've had a really, whether it's launching an event or event delivery or going through those peak moments of the planning phase. I know once you've been for a ride, you just settle.
And I've probably got about 20 ideas.
Well, that's also a problem as well, because like, well, what about this? What about that? What about the other? Like that passion as a biker slash roadie slash duathlete. Actually, I didn't really know you were a duathlete, but sure, let's go with it. Like, what's that? Like, how does that passion now influence what you do with enduro and how you run events?
Yeah, I think we're definitely, when we started, we're putting on races, bike races, bike races. But we've definitely made a shift now to what's the experience we want people to have. And those that have done the Whaka 100 the last few years, we've thought of some detail. For example, the portaloos at the Whaka 100. Portaloos are typically a really crap experience at a lot of outdoor festivals and events and stuff. And we sort of started selling sponsorship for portaloos. Shout out to That's It. They were one of the first to jump on board. But it was we try to brand up the portaloos and make them a little bit more. I don't even know why we did it, to be fair, but it was just like, that's a shit part of the event. How do we bring some humor into it? And so we pretty much went and did some toilet humor stuff in there and try to make that a talking point of the event. So I think everything we do, we're a team of 8 now. We literally sit upstairs when we decide to do something or change something. We literally sit there and run off every scenario we can think of and like what's the best experience, and it's the best experience for the rider. It's not for the staff. It's all about those participants, whether they're riding or running, or even the spectators that are on site. At the again Whaka 100, you go to the creek crossing now, and we have music up there, and there's there's cowbells being given away and all that sort of thing. I think there's just that whole encompassing experience that I think makes events special. So I definitely know in New Zealand there's races and then there's an event. And though we don't operate in the race aspect of things, we're trying to operate in that event space where we're building out that whole experience, from the time that you touch the website through to getting your finisher's medal at the finish line, trying to think of every moment that will make it special for an individual.
We often talk about the core product being the riding part, and I know that you put a lot of emphasis on what's that riding experience going to be. What's your philosophy behind how you design a course or choose trails, whether that's how you evolve Whaka each year or sort of more recently with the Volcanic Epic, or how do you actually approach that, knowing what you know from a rider's point of view?
Yeah, I think the events based here in Rotorua are very hard to plan. It's a production forest. It's actually private land that public don't. It's not like free trails that you can go out and ride. There's actually an agreement in place where this forest is actually private, owned by the iwi, Central North Island iwis, and we get to ride in there. So there's a few things you need to manage around that space. So
shout out to the stakeholders.
Yeah, and the Trails Trust, they got 200 and something kilometres of trails, right? And there's 6 to 8 guys in there doing it, and they get funded by the council, and the rest of it, their operating costs to maintain those trails, it's like $2 a metre. They got 260 kilometres, I think. You chuck that into a year at $2 a metre, and these guys are only raising about 100 grand at the moment. And the trails are at this level, and they're keeping them at that level. But man, if they didn't have funding, they'd drop away. So I think big shout out to the Trails Trust, because they are doing an amazing job, and the 80, 90, 100 odd volunteers that adopt trails. We are one of them. We have 4 trails that we look after. But yeah, there's
including my favourite, just for the record,
Dipper.
Love a bit of Dipper.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's just been they got a refurb. I think the council paid for the Trails Trust to refurb that one, and it's a little jewel in the crown there for the the sort of family close-in trails. So, but I think going back to the ride experience, I think there's occasionally, if you're in one of our events, you might notice we tweak a course at the last minute or we change something. It's because we're being out there riding and go, oh, that's a bit cracked to ride that bit in that particular flow and sequence. So I think Whaka 100, if we reflect on that, it's meant to be hard. So
Yeah.
we intentionally do make it hard. Um, the first 10, 15 Ks is single track. You're straight into single track. It's really important to get up front. But we also in the middle of that section before you go into the 100 acre woods and creek track, we chuck a fire road in there so you can pass, you can feed, you can drink a bottle because it's about that point we actually need to get some nutrition in and try and pass some people and all that sort of thing. So a lot of that, the way we course mark is based on what a rider and an athlete has experienced. Like we don't put arrows down low on the ground. We don't spray paint arrows. It's like all at handlebar height, exactly where your eyes are looking. Um, our team, our course manager Tom, spent a year sort of getting used to it all, and now he's like really building up his team, and he knows that the arrows need to go at this height. They have a hierarchy on every single arrow is meant to be in the same place every single time you get to an arrow. So, as an athlete, we run 4 or 5 different distances in the Whaka 100. Consistently, your arrow is always in the same place, in the same angle, attached the same way, and it's all of those little tiny details, that they have to put a cable tie on a certain way to lock it on so it doesn't move. Those are all the little things that nobody will see, but that'll enhance that experience. Then we try to plan, like, aid stations, for example. We have to move them sometimes to the harvesting and all that sort of thing, but we try to put them in places where spectators can get to them. So last year, we put one quite accessible, but that didn't work for the riders. Amazing for spectators and supporters, didn't work for the riders. So this year we have to get we're up on top of a hill, like literally on top of one of the higher points in the forest. Got to get all the marquees up there. Got to get 2,000 litres of water up there. All the drop bags up a steep gravel road, which we've had to sort of go and practice and work out whether we can actually do it. If it rains, it's like, can we get up that hill in the rain? Um, so there's a lot of that stuff that's going on. So on the day that it's like a duck on water, nobody actually notices potentially all the problem solving and stuff that's going on behind the scenes. But I think coming back to it, I think it's just the quality of trail and the way it rides, how you link them all together. That's sort of what makes an event special. You can go to events, and I've experienced where they just whack a few trails together and off you go. And they might not have cut back the bushes, or you go through a river crossing that's up to your shoulders when it's meant to be knee deep because nobody's checked it before the event. We sort of make sure that all that stuff's checked and checked and checked. Whaka 100, I think there's about 10,000 hours of planning and preparation that go into that event before we actually execute it. So it's pretty much half of our year is spent on the Whaka 100. But yeah.
And you've got multiple. You don't have 19 events anymore, but you've got multiple events. So in the riding events that you have, what's the relationship between those events? Like, what are they, and how do they work together? So you're not just doing the same thing every time.
Yeah, cool. So we've obviously got the Whaka 100, which is our big one of the year. And flowing into that is the Highlander mountain bike event. So we've sort of made a conscious shift over the last few years to try and be go test your legs, see how you're placed, get preparation. We're a little teaser to the Whaka 100. We don't use all the trails, and we use slightly different configurations, but the idea is that you can go and test yourself and build up to that. We are looking at putting skills camps and stuff into that next year as well. So there's a little bit more of a purposeful weekend for training for the Whaka 100. So those two have this real direct synergy together. We have just started managing Hamner events in Hamner Springs. So there'll be the Tombstone mountain bike event, which is a marathon down there. That'll be coming back in 2026 at the end of the year. And that'll also sort of fit into that marathon family with the Highlander and Whaka 100. So there's a real cool synergy between those. And then there's the Volcanic Epic, which is our 5-day stage race. I'm quite passionate about stage racing. So that one's pretty cool. 2026 is probably where we wanted to get it to when COVID came. and we had to sort of go through this funky reset phase and start rebuilding the event before it even started. Sounds a bit odd, but yeah, we're probably a couple of months off delivering that. And then old mate COVID came along and shut everything down here in Rotorua, and it threw a spanner in the works. But I think the volcanic epic really doesn't have anything to do with the Whaka 100 apart from a like-minded rider that would ride that. In terms of the stages are around about 20 to 30 to 40 up to 55 kilometers. We do try to focus only on the good stuff, and if we have to connect it together with some bad stuff, it's a bad day on our part, but we've intentionally had to use that trail rather than something absolutely diabolical. But I think the whole idea of the volcanic epic is to sort of showcase that Central North Island riding, and Taupo, South Waikato, and Rotorua. We may go further afield one day, but that's where it is at the moment. And trying to bring more riders into sort of that cross country space that may not ordinarily do it, and have this shit. It's just a really good time, eh? Like BC bike race. I did that, and I still have memories of that, and end up talking to some of the BC bike race staff now that want to come over and do the volcanic epic. But I went in, talk about no training and doing dumb ideas. I went to BC bike race with about a month of training. If anybody's ever done BC, it's not easy. There's some big bloody hills that makes the Whaka look tiny in terms of how big some of the hill climbs are. But it was just so fun, like riding different locations every day, different trails, different crazy locals, spectating, supporting the event. And then you sort of get to go do fun things afterwards and have a few beers with other riders. We were the big Kiwi contingent in that one. So we got to sort of hang up. But that's the idea of the volcanic epic. It's just sort of showcasing trails in a way that you normally showcasing trails in a way you normally wouldn't ride them. So
Yeah. And bringing people to the place where you love to ride, it's your home
totally,
as well.
totally,
And also, that famed Kiwi hospitality, and the social aspect, which you touched on right at the start. It's like, why do you do, why are you drawn to events rather than just going to ride? You kind of got that social aspect to it. And I've seen that at Volcanic in particular with, people hanging out. They're riding with each other 5 days in a row. So you had a completely different connection with people that you might not otherwise do on like a 1 day race or, something like that.
totally.
Yeah. Let's talk a bit more about Whaka 100, because you kind of just mentioned it, that's your big one, but it is the big one, right? It's a huge event now. And I know you've grown it pretty considerably over the last 8 or 9 years. Like, what makes it so special? Why is that? Why is it so big? And why do people keep coming back?
That is a great question. That's a great question. If we knew the answer to that, there'll be probably about 50 other events in New Zealand doing the same thing. Um, I think got to give a shout out to Marcus and Dean that created this beast back in 2007 off the back of the UCI World Cup that was here in Rotorua. Whaka 100 came about because there was talk about getting the Marathon Worlds here. There is still talk about getting the Marathon Worlds here, but in a very different flavour now. But that's how it started. Shit, like what does make it special? I'd like to say the trails, but it's more than the trails. I'd like to say the riders, but it's more than the riders. It's probably the constant improvement on the event delivery and what we offer. Could be that. But I think it's I don't know, Whaka 100's in its own community. There's people out there training all through summer, and they're meeting up with people they haven't normally ridden with before, and then they start riding together. Shout out to Wado Tomlin, the Māori that bikes. If you watched his content, I can remember when he first started riding on Whaka, and he'd turn up here by himself, and now he turns up here with like 15 mates. He doesn't ride the Whaka anymore, but there's a whole bunch of people that go riding together and have connected through events like this. So I think it's a community, to be fair. The event it's created its own community, which is kind of cool. There's no one thing I would say that has delivered its success. Um, Ultimately, couldn't do it without the riders, and you couldn't do it without the trails.
Yeah.
So, probably leaning on those two things heavily, on and what makes it special. So,
They're two really pretty core elements to everything.
yeah,
Otherwise, you haven't got a riding event. You've got a, I don't know, music festival in the forest or something. I you keep talking about the trails and the Trails Trust, and that you got something incredibly special. And I'm not from there, and I always play back to you guys. You know, don't forget that people travel from around the world to ride where you get to ride on a daily basis. Do you ever really take that for granted?
I don't. I don't think we do. Like, man, I love riding here, and it's a bit like, it's back in the day using a surfing analogy. Depending on which way the wind blows, it'd be depending on where you surf. Like, I remember tripping between the east coast and the west coast. There's places like that here, depending on how the frost is, or how wet it's been, or how even dry and sunny it's been. Like, whether you've got such a variety of trail, you can go, oh, I'm going to go, in the middle of summer, I'm going to go up and ride the natives. And you'll be out there and you'll see nobody, and it's in the middle of the day, and you just literally see nobody pop out at a trailhead, and there's like 50 people there. Um, I think it's kind of rad. It definitely is a special place. We moved here because of the mountain biking. Definitely not a native to Rotorua, to Bay of Plenty, which is the bigger region, but we literally moved here for bike riding, and because I was training so much back in those days. So, yeah.
And there's a lot of people that use your events as an excuse to visit and ride there, right?
Totally.
Just let's pat ourselves on the back for a second. How many people a year do your events bring to the regions that you work in? And if you can remember the numbers, they're very big numbers, but what's the actual impact of that to the region?
Cool. In terms of participation across all our events, if we include mountain bike and running, you're talking about north of 15,000 athletes a year. That totality of people that brings in is north of 35,000 people. So repeat visitation, spectators, supporters, family members. And it's term of what events do for the region. It's in terms of $30 to $40 million of economic impact through our event portfolio, and then you've got all the other big events here. So I think events have a very important place to play in regions and to support those regions. It was amazing. Definitely during COVID, when the hotels were a lot quieter, and Whaka 100 sort of made its comeback after the COVID disruption. Not all our beds were online back then in the hotels, so we were filling up hotels at that stage. And I think we're doing sort of 2,500, 3,000. We're now sort of gearing towards 3,500, 4,000 athletes. So it's a mega, and it's kind of cool. It's hard. I've come off the course marking team now, but it's for the last few years when I've been out there with the course marking team, so many people want to stop and talk to you for that whole week. So I think I'm now put in a ute and I'm just driving around talking to people. That's my new job. But like, there's just so many people here, people that have been following your content online from all over the world: Ireland, Wales, America, Scotland, all that. There's a bunch of African nations all through Asia. People just turn up and they start talking to you, and there's some really cool stories about why they've come or what's inspired them to come here. So. Events are a significant impact for Rotorua. It's not just us. There are, Tarawera Ultra, and, Crankworks gets a lot of international viewership that we couldn't normally reach. But I think between all the events here, there's some pretty cool off-road offerings here between trail running and mountain biking.
Yeah, it's a pretty special place to organise events. As you're growing, whether it's Whaka or in general or the industry, what are the biggest challenges you're facing at the moment? I mean, you talked there about having 8 people in the team, which not that many people would know about, probably because you've grown that team over the last few years. But like looking forward now, what are the things that keep you up at night, industry wise? Like, you know, I mean that we could do a whole 3 hours on that, I think, but and it's not just Red Bull because you're cutting back on that. But what is it? You know, what are the biggest challenges?
Not Red Bull here.
Maybe not just for you, but like, what are the things that your team spends most of their time on in terms of hurdles to jump over at the moment?
I think the biggest hurdle to jump over, and with due respect, is the cost of living, and making the events financially sustainable, obviously for us as an event business, but also for the participants to participate in. It's hard. Whaka 100, we plan 18 months in advance. So at the moment, we're starting to think 2026 already. Um, and there's some curveballs, like the latest round of minimum wage went up and it pushed our suppliers that supply us stuff to make the events cool, it pushed them up like 5%. That's not always an increase we can sort of plan for. So I think making sure that the events stay sustainable for everybody in terms of the cost of them is quite a massive hurdle. That's probably our biggest one that we work on all the time is just how do you actually make everything stack up, both for a participant and for the event sponsorship, all that sort of stuff. So, and they cost a lot. Events do cost a lot. So, yeah. So that's probably the biggest thing. The second biggest thing is how do we do more cool shit? You know, it's not cool after we've done it for 3 years, so we've got to come up with something new. So, always looking out there to see what we can add to the event. The shootout that we did, you were the DJ at it for the first few iterations, but we did the shootout, the Isuzu shootout. And that was me literally sitting there watching Bathurst one day going, how cool would it be to have some sort of shootout in the Whaka 100? And so we ended up with that 1.9 kilometer time trial, which was chaos and carnage and exciting and not exciting. And like, it was just awesome stuff.
It was also mad hot that day, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. So, that was kind of cool. It's something we want to bring back because it was quite fun and cool,
Because that kind of changed to then the Eliminator for the last few years, which was the urban Eliminator and then the non-urban Eliminator. So is this we're going to change the Eliminator to a shootout again? Is this breaking news?
Oh, no, it's not breaking news. It's definitely a thought. Again, trying to make the event sustainable. We do the Eliminator because we're passionate about seeing opportunities for New Zealand athletes. The Eliminator absolutely makes no sense as a business. It's we can't even break even on it, but we're literally doing it because we're passionate about seeing Kiwis succeed. And the first year we did it, Lockie Brown out of the Waikato won the national champs, went to the Worlds, his first World Championships. He actually won the race and won a World Cup. World Cup, not World Championships. He won the World Cup. And then I think the World Champs, he was setting one of the quickest times and snapped his chain in qualifying. But if we didn't create that opportunity, that pathway wouldn't have evolved. That event cost us about $30,000 to run. I think we make like $3,000 in entry fees. It's
Bit of a loss leader.
Sandwich. It's literally a shit sandwich. And that's why it's not so urban anymore, because traffic, as everybody knows, the death of road cycling, traffic management costs a fortune to put those road cones out there and people to ring up and then complain about road cones. So, it's just what it is. So, we do sort of want to get to a festival vibe with Whaka 100. So, whether there's some Friday sort of things happening that are a little bit more for the riders, a little bit more for the bike industry, potentially like Thursday nights, like we talked about doing night races and, sunset super Ds and all that sort of fun stuff, hill climb, you do hill climb races and all those crazy things. But all of that takes time and energy, and we're trying to make sure the main event this year is the best it can be. All that saying, we've increased the expo by like 100%. So
In terms of
the
size?
Expo at the Whaka 100, yeah. So Friday there's an industry morning where industry only come into Expo. It's all sealed off for just the industry, and then Friday afternoon when we open the venue up to the public and into the riders, yeah, basically Expo. There's just there's so many brands. I think there's only a couple of big bike brands that aren't currently there. The rest of them are there. Yeah, there's all sorts of stuff happening. I think there's 45 exhibitors there at the moment, so which is pretty rad for cross country. It's trying to create that whole, as a rider or a spectator, it's cool to go through and see all the new brands and see what, Amflow's doing with their new e-bikes and the DJI powered stuff, or, Bosch has got that e-bike out there, or Giant's got some new bikes that may be coming out, or, see the XTR stuff from Shimano in the flesh before you buy it, to be able to go and try stuff before you buy, I think is going to be pretty cool, because it's really hard to do in a bike shop now. They don't really carry lots of stock anymore, so you sort of got to order it in and hope it's really good. So I think by having that expo, it's really cool for those brands to engage back with the riders and the riders to engage with them. So yeah, that's
That
pretty cool.
that's awesome, and I think shout out to your team for coming up with that scale vision and then executing on it. I know Alicia and Mike work really hard on the expo and on the sponsors and partners side of what you do, and then obviously you've got Helen in your operations team making sure it all works. And it'll piece together. But I think that's going to be really cool. And I always think, could you create a reason for someone to come to an event even if they weren't going to ride? And I think you're getting to that point now with Whaka 100, which is like, even if I'm not going to ride, you kind of got to be there, otherwise you're going to have mad FOMO. So
Yeah, and we definitely started to hear those comments where it's like it's that one place where mountain biking comes together every year. So you'll walk through after a race and there'll be like downhill riders and even some of the slopestyle girls were there, like Robin Gomes was there last year hanging out, and they just come to hang out with the other riders and people that were racing and stuff like that. So there's a whole bunch of different people there. They might not be participating, but they just come out and hang out towards the finish line. And we had a bunch of talent in the country last year with Sam Gaze back home for the first time in a while. Sammy Maxwell just off the under 23 world champs the other year, and the Oliver brothers and Gwendolyn Gibson, and there's lots of potential new talent coming through to the event this year as well. So it's kind of cool that they hang out in the venue as well with just the everyday riders. Pretty cool for New Zealand, because we don't really get to see a lot of talent all in one area very often. So it's kind of special that event does it. So
and with the different distances, have you tracked anyone who's started off really small and worked through all of the race distances? Is that a thing?
yeah, that
Whether
is a thing.
that
I think
results in someone becoming a professional athlete or just a mad rider, like do you see that progression with what you do?
yeah, definitely think that is our little mate Chaos, Sammy Maxwell. She started racing with us 2014. Um, and I think she podiumed in one of her first races, and she was a tiny little kid back then. And then you've seen us progress, and that's a pretty cool journey to watch them go through events. Sammy's definitely been one of them. There's so many, but a lot of the young sort of under 19 riders that are in the elite 100 now started back in the 25k. So there's definitely a lot of progression. There's also a lot of older guys that have progressed through the events and now on e-bikes in the 50k. But that's just the way it is these days as you get older. Yeah, it's definitely lots of progression. We also see lots of progression with riders riding and then giving volunteering a go because they might be injured, and then all of a sudden they're on our casual workforce team of we've got 60 staff that work on the Whaka 100 during the race, and now there's a whole bunch of them that have gone from riding, volunteering into being in the race. So there's heaps of like those progressive steps that go through. So
I think
yeah,
that's
pretty awesome.
that's that community you're talking about. It's such a cool community to be part of, whether you're just coming to hang out, like you're touching there on sort of the wider team. And I've sort of been floating around the enduro space for, I don't know, 7 years now, something like that, 6 or 7
It's been a
years.
while. Yeah.
And just for those people that might not see what happens behind the scenes, the vibe is almost as good in the team as it is in the crowd. And it's a really cool atmosphere. And we see the same faces turn up at every event because they want to be part of it. It's such a cool work environment to be involved with. And I think that energy then pays off, pays it forward through to the riders, through to the spectators. And that goes for your supply chain as well. Like, you obviously work with a whole bunch of suppliers, whether that be medical and safety crews or AV or whatever, and everyone, it's this kind of weird, everyone just pulls together in the same direction. It's a really cool culture that you've built through that. I just want to talk a little bit about kind of the wider mountain biking scene a bit, and how much do you think about how you fit in or stand out? And I know that you're really passionate about the riding side, but also the event industry and mountain biking and cycling. Where do you see Nduro Events playing a role in that, either passively or actively? Like, kind of where do you sit with that at the moment?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I definitely think if we sort of like pick out the key indicators for that, the reason why we do marathon nationals and eliminator nationals is to create pathway for athletes, basically anybody that's inspired to chase more. If I had it more my way, I'd probably have more national champs under our belt than we do currently. But that's just the way it works. So I think, where do we fit in? I really don't know where we fit in. I don't know if we influence anything. I really don't know that. But I think if we were suddenly to stop doing what we're doing, mountain biking, and particularly in cross country, would be pretty dismal. It'd be pretty bad. You're not left with much. You still have little club races and stuff, but there's nothing that would nothing that would excite me personally. Like, there are some other really good events out there, but to get an event to where the Whaka 100 is, it's been 10 years plus of work to get it there. So I think if that suddenly disappeared, we would be as the mountain bike community, would be pretty shit, to be fair. So, but yeah.
I won't tell the story about one of my. Actually, I'm going to tell the story. One of my favorite ever stories, and this is something that I tell lots of people when thinking and talking about Tim. So a few years ago, I used to work on a bunch of mountain bike races, the Pioneer, Mototapu and stuff. And I went into work one day, and my boss at the time was a guy called Dave Beach. When we were at Lagadier and then Ironman, and I remember walking in, and the two of us looking at each other, go, "Did you see what Tim did last night?" And Tim, and I don't really know the context to it at the time, but Tim just created and launched this race called XCO Republic. And it just came out of nowhere. And he kind of just decided, we need another XCO race, and I'm going to go and do it. So you just made an event happen, what seemingly felt like overnight. And that was just your vision for, I want an XCO race. I know how to do that. I'm going to go and do it. And that for me just sums you up. I think the work that I do with you now is sometimes to make sure that you've got some success parameters around some of those things. But I always use that XCO Republic example of kind of your flair, I suppose, and passion. I'm just going to go and do that because I think it should happen. Play back to me. Is that actually how that? Did you just come up with that in one night, basically?
So basically, at XCO, because participation is so low, like in the country, people don't want to ride circles. I don't really like wearing the left side of my tyre out, so I don't want to ride around in a circle. But participation was so low. Again, Mountain Bike New Zealand, there's a couple of people in there that do amazing work, and they don't have enough support. There's not enough people supporting Mountain Bike New Zealand and Cycling New Zealand, for that fact, that the national series at the time pretty much stopped. and the nationals were pretty fickle at times. And the whole concept was, okay, let's prove we can do it without any budget and successfully run this event with no zero startup, basically. And I think we had 280 riders on the line. The first year was a rad little race. There was old people complaining the music was too loud and to turn it down because it was literally, punk rock and high energy music. And I think Sammy Shaw or Sammy Maxwell might have won those that year. Somewhere along the line, somebody won them, obviously. But it was sort of just going to prove that you can create an event that feels really good to ride in without having to use funding as an excuse to do it. Whether it was sustainable or not, you can probably guess whether it was or wasn't because it doesn't exist anymore. But yeah, it was a cool little thing to fill a hole in the calendar in that particular year when nothing was really happening. I think the year before the summer, well, the national series was on the edges of not happening, and I got involved in it then and pretty much organised to make sure it all happened and set up entries and stuff like that. So yeah, super passionate about XCO, but it really does suck in New Zealand. So like, well, to be fair, in the Southern Hemisphere, New Zealand, Australia, XCO is just like I think we've got some really good athletes, but the whole UCI model does not work for the Southern Hemisphere in the terms of the age groups and the way we spread them out and stuff like that. I think if we could have the Sail GP or the Super League triathlon version of XCO in New Zealand and Australia, it would probably go off. Really make it about the athletes and make it a showpiece rather than
Hey,
some competition I've got to go slaving balls on.
do
So
I need to put that on the whiteboard?
no, you need to squash that idea.
Was actually it's going to lead me onto my next question, which is, where do you see riding events going in the future? New formats. This is actually a question. I'm not ad-libbing this. This was actually a question I wrote down. But where do you see events going? Where do you see the opportunity in terms of formats, tech, or ideas that are on your radar, which may or may not come to fruition? But if you cast your eye forward, what do you think is going to happen next?
I think some of the disciplines are going to slow down and change, develop, adapt to their changes. Like enduro is starting to go through that phase now, and gravity enduro. Um, Now Max is racing BMX, our little guy. I can see a really cool opportunity here domestically, going back to the XCO model that I just discussed, where that could actually, breaking away from the UCI mold for certain disciplines could actually be quite fortuitous in terms of um, creating more of a show around the racing and making the athletes athletes and as you know, we discussed this about Eliminator or having a national or an Australasian series where the athletes were the priority and it was all about their profile and stuff like that, and just having this massive race that we take to the public and smack it right in their face. I think there's going to be a little bit more of that come around. Being in the Southern Hemisphere, I think we'll be the last to adopt it, and we'll probably do a shit job at it because there's just not enough funds to deliver it. In terms of like, you go to Europe, there's a lot of money floating out there for events like that sort of thing. You got to look at like the Eliminator World Cup series is bonkers. There's 50, 60,000 people standing on the side of an Eliminator track that's only 500 meters long. There's a broadcast audience of 500,000 to 1 million people watching live on a live stream. They're probably all there to watch the carnage, but it's pretty exciting for the athletes to be, surrounded by people, and that's part of the reason why we went to a grandstand in the Whaka 100, was to make it feel really good for the riders. We haven't done the grandstand for the last few years because they haven't been available, but that whole grandstand idea was from Nova Mesto, which is probably my favourite XCO race with, I think it's a ski complex and they've got the grandstand right against the finish line. I remember seeing photos of Anton back in the day and more recently Sammy Maxwell crossing those finish lines, and there's photos of them just, fist pumping or whatever, going across the finish line, and the grandstand's just full of people. That'd be really cool to get it to like that in New Zealand and Australia. But we've got a lot of work to do as an industry in the bike industry and event industry to get to that point. Um, in terms of, I think if you're not doing an experience in your event, you're going to struggle to grow going forward. I think that's where it really at. Like Whaka 100, we're always thinking about the experiences people have along every step of the journey. Run the Forest is a real testament to that whole experience first model where there's 15, 16 entertainment sites over a space of 12 kilometers, and there's just all sorts of crazy stuff happening in it, and it's bright and it's in your face and it's merged into the public, and like we're just everywhere. I think those sort of events in the mass participation space will continue to grow. I think some of the other ones will start to find it hard. And we'll probably try and throw a whole lot of different things at it to try and make sure something sticks. But I think if you focus on the experience and quality over quantity, I think things will pay off going forward.
Love it. It was only a couple of days ago. It was Mark Cuban tweeted. I don't know what's the equivalent of tweeting these days, Xing, or whatever it is on X. And he put this thing out about how we're moving into this world of AI. And actually, I think he thinks that there's going to be more and more demand for in-person community, face-to-face experiences as the offset to that. So I feel fairly buoyed about being in the live event game for that exact reason. Because if AI and tech is going to simplify your life, you just got more time to ride and run and enjoy yourself, which I think is really, really cool. Okay, so we're going to try and create, with this show, we're going to try and create a bit of a fast fire closing section, which may evolve a bit over time, but there's 5 questions and I just want your gut feel answer to these. What is your favorite all-time trail to ride?
Probably got to say at the moment, Tombstone in Hamner Springs. If you haven't ridden it, you should have.
There'll be a great
Yeah.
opportunity at some point towards the end of 2026 for lots of people to come and
December
ride.
6th, 2026.
December the 6th, 2026, Tombstone Mountain Bike. It's going to be there. In that case, what's your favourite local trail to ride of all time?
Well, that evolves. I haven't been riding much, so I don't know. No, I will keep it on the legal side of trails because I shouldn't be discussing unsanctioned trails.
Probably
Probably
best.
Box of Birds. Box of Birds is my home run trail, so that's pretty rad. And then if you're coming here for a holiday, you got to go to Whaka.
Nice. What is your favourite bike that you've ridden of all time?
Considering it's still hanging in my garage, I would like to say it's a Trek. Fuck, I don't even know what model it was back then. It's from the Worlds, but I'm currently actually riding a Merida 96 8000, which is a couple of years old now, but it's a marathon bike that's got quite a slack angle on it and super playful. So that's definitely my favourite bike at the moment. So
You're still on an acoustic, not an e-bike?
got a bit of both. So got the acoustic, which comes out, and then obviously got an e-bike, which sort of replaces having to do shuttle uplifts, and so you can go out and have fun on the trails and smash some downs without having to queue up and wait for a shuttle or a gondola or whatnot.
Nice. What's your dream riding destination that you haven't yet ticked off?
Yeah, like, I'm quite interested in Four Islands in Croatia. Is it Croatia? Island of Rab. I think it's Croatia. Out that way anyway. Um, Probably doing the Four Islands mountain bike stage races.
Nice.
My ideal way of doing that, but I don't know. It doesn't seem to rain there, so and it's sort of one of those Mediterranean locations. So yeah, that's quite up there at the moment, and obviously going back to BC is also up there.
Nice. And then what's your post-ride guilty pleasure? Or where do you like to go post-ride? It could be a thing or a place.
Yeah, secret spot in here in Rotorua is top shelf, smash burger, bacon, side of onion rings, and a Coke.
Nice.
Putting your foot in and putting your foot in one of those shinny tubs so you can soak your hot feet in the hot water. So,
Nice. It's a good socializing spot as well. And shout out to their sausage rolls on behalf of Tom, who's your course manager. He loves that.
yeah, we're there very often when we're marking courses for the Whaka 100. I think we're there daily.
Nice. Hey, we're going to wrap this up, but just want to do a couple of opportunities to talk about what's coming up for you in the immediate future. Like over the next few weeks, where's your head at?
Sweet. What have we got coming up this year in events? We've got Run the Forest, 8 weeks, 4,500 plus runners, trail run here in the forest in the Redwoods. Then we roll out in October is Whaka 100, the 18th edition. Again, set to be another record, so we'll be sort of around the 3,500 mark. And then we're all going next year, so rolling out next year, January 17th, is the Hamner Springs Adventure Run, which is an ultra marathon down in Hamner Springs and up into the alpine sort of mountains of Mount Isabel. So go up there, 55k running event with some other distances. We roll then into Volcanic Epic back here in Central North Island. Then what do we have after that? We have Hamner Half Marathon back down in Hamner Springs just in autumn, so it's quite awesome, the colours and the snow and all that sort of stuff. Geez, what have we got after that? Highlanders back. So Highlanders back mid-May. We'll have training camps and stuff attached to that and some nutritional talks and upskilling for riders should they want to do that. Then we basically back where we are right now, back into Run the Forest, Whaka 100, and then it'll be the, I believe, second or third edition of the Tombstone, but Tombstone Our Way. So combining up there with what the locals have created down there in Hamner Springs and picking it up and elevating it. So watch this space on what it's going to look like, but I may or may not have been teasing about a gravel event. You have to wait and see. But there'll definitely be a mountain bike marathon and some other shenanigans happening over 3 days in Hamner Springs.
Nice. You've definitely been teasing a gravel event, but as a tease
for
at
a
the
friend.
moment.
It's for a friend.
It's a tease at the moment.
75 and 150 is where it's at, apparently.
Okay, that's pretty juicy. Any shout outs you want to do, whether team, partners, legend riders?
Yeah, probably give a shout out to the Trails Trust here, and like I say, they've got a lot of work to do on the trails here, and obviously we had a bit of harvesting and the building some new stuff that'll be online for the Whaka 100. So definitely recommend. I think you can buy a membership, like a membership to the Trails Trust. That costs you about $20 a year, but that actually helps them secure more funding and stuff from charity grants and stuff like that to develop the trails and keep them maintained. Without membership, it's really hard for them to actually apply for funding. So huge shout out for everything they do. They do a lot of silent work leading into the Whaka 100, fluffing trails and grooming trails. We don't ask them to, they just go do it. And it's they just want to make the rider experience epic. So big shout out to that. Just a shout out to everybody that's sort of getting stuck in for their winter training for Whaka 100 too, to be fair. So that's winter sucks for training. So
Yeah,
I think it's dark at about 5:10 at the moment at night and daylight at 7 o'clock. So there's not much time to do training in normal light. So yeah.
awesome. And if people want to find out more about you, your events, where do they go to find that out?
Cool. Nduro, so nduro.co.nz, not with an E. That's where you find out about our events. That's probably the best place to go for it. Otherwise, Whaka 100 and all the other events have their own Instagram, Facebook, little stuff happening on YouTube and stuff like that as well. If you're watching this, you're probably watching it on YouTube, so I don't need to tell you that. But